Good evening, everyone. You are very welcome to another installment of our weekly webinar called Discover Your Future at DCU. I'm really excited for this week's webinar. We are going to be talking about all things languages in DCU, whether you want to do a degree that's purely studying language and translation, or whether you want to look at a business course that has some elements of language modules involved. We hope today will be really informative for everyone, and you're very welcome. My name is Sinead McCrohan. I host this series, and in a moment's time, I'm going to welcome in our panelists who know a lot more about languages than I do. But just before we get started, I'll draw your attention to the Q&A function that is along the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions over the next half an hour or so, and you would like to ask our panelists something in particular, whether that is about entry requirements or their experience as a student or even as a graduate, as an academic, please do let us know through the Q&A and we would be delighted to help you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists to the call because, as I said, they know a lot more than me about languages in DCU. So I'm going to welcome firstly Dr. Dervla Cook into the call as a panelist who lectures in French in DCU School of Applied Language and Intercultural Studies. So Dervla, you're very welcome. I'm just going to make sure that this is all working well. The tech sometimes is not on my side. Next, I'm going to welcome Jack Gleeson into the call, who is currently studying his master's in French and Irish in DCU. So Jack, you're very welcome. I'm going to promote you to a panelist also. And then last but certainly not least, our current student, Conor McCarthy, who's studying his undergraduate degree in international business and Spanish in DCU, who's going to give us a current student insight. And I think that is almost all of our panelists joined onto the call. Hi, Dervla, how are you? I can see you. Oh, I can see you, but I can't hear you. Oh, you're muted. Let me make sure you can unmute yourself.
That's fine.
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
I was booted out then when you promoted me to panelist. You booted me out.
And then it came back. I don't even know what that journey goes on. Honestly, you could have been in another dimension for all I know. You're here, and that's perfect. And Jack, you're here. I can see you. And Conor, you're both very welcome. How are you keeping?
Good. Good. Good.
Great stuff. We have a healthy number of attendees in the call today who are looking forward to hearing everything about languages in DCU. So I'm really excited to hear your various stories, and I'm sure will inspire a couple of prospective students on the call today who hope to study in DCU. So we might go maybe to the start. Dervla, I might ask you about the different courses available for students who are interested in studying languages at third level.
At DCU? Yeah, sure. Okay, so I work in SALIS, as Sinead has said. So that's the School of Applied Languages and Intercultural Studies at DCU. And we have a number of different programs that you can join. So you could choose to do translation studies, which is called Applied Languages and Translation Studies, so ALTS as we know it, ALTS. Or you could choose to do joint honours, which is a combination of French, German, Spanish, so either one of those, not together now, so French, German, Spanish plus media, politics or law. So it's a joint degree between, say, French and media or law and German, any of those combinations, and that's it. And then we also have international business, which Conor's going to talk about, and we have global business, which involves going to, I think it's only France, Germany and Spain at the moment, but there is USA, but that has nothing to do with languages. And you spend the first 2 of your years in DCU and you do the second 2 in a renowned institution in either Spain, Germany or France. So a lot of very exciting stuff going on, a lot of interesting modules, and yeah, it's kind of I don't know, contemporary approach to language and culture. So even if you're doing ALTS, which is translation studies, you'll be doing some literature and culture and film. And there's textual analysis involved in everything. And Conor's going to talk a bit more about the business side. I think I'll just leave it there for the moment, Sinead, if you've any.
Yeah, that's perfect. We have an eager beaver who has asked a question already. I think that's record time for a question, which is fantastic in one of these webinars. And something I was going to ask for Dervla, in terms of entry requirements, so someone's asking to study French, is it necessary to have intermediate level? So we might assume this person is leaving Cert at the minute.
Okay, well, intermediate level just means you have your leaving cert at a H4. So that's the requirement for all of the courses in joint honours. And I'm pretty sure that's the case for ALS as well, except for German and Spanish, you can do ab initio, which means from first principles, as in from beginner level. That's in the translation studies program. But with joint honours, you do French, German, or Spanish at that intermediate level, which means leaving cert level with a H4.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you very much. And
or
for
above.
our students,
ideally above.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our students who maybe are studying a language for the Leaving Cert, which most would be at the minute, you know, when I remember studying languages for the Leaving Cert, and it's a lot of, okay, you read the comprehension, you answer it, and then you listen to the text or the audio and you answer it, and you have a bit of a conversation and you do that, and that's the extent of it. I'm sure it's slightly different in university when you come in. It's not as maybe formulaic as that. As you said, you can study film modules and literature. Could you tell us a little bit even about what you lecture in French, Dervla, and the different ways that a student can learn a language in third level?
Yeah, well, there's always going to be some sort of cultural element involved, whether it's history, the sociological sort of approach, so how the societies have developed and what their current challenges are and current issues, like immigration or racism, or their approaches to even environmental issues. That could be something that would come up, and then that could be discussed then in the literature and the film. So if you're doing joint honours, which I teach on predominantly, I teach quite a bit of film, but also contemporary novels. So they're usually from, you know, the last 20 years, and sometimes they're even from other countries that are French speaking, like Quebec, for example. I have a final year module on Quebec and France, and we're looking at the indigenous people writing novels in French-speaking Canada at the moment. So there's a lot of very interesting and diverse material. Jack, I think you talked about Amélie on one of the courses we did. Yeah, so that was for translation studies. So translation studies do literature and culture as well. So film can be subsumed under either literature or culture.
Yeah, I just think that's a really interesting aspect of languages that students mightn't consider is possible, you know, going into third level, which is interesting. So, Jack, you can't get enough of languages at the minute. You're studying your master's in two different languages.
Well, yeah, so I'm actually finishing my PhD at the moment, at the very, very final stages. So I did a master, so I've been doing a PhD for the last 5 years now. And I first came to DCU 6 years ago when I did a master's in translation studies. So that's what I did, and I studied French and Irish. And just to reiterate what Dervla was saying there, and yourself, Sinead, when you study languages, you really get a holistic education. You're getting a whole overview of France and French culture, and that allows you to pursue many options afterwards. Then if you want to do research like I did, I looked at the representation of French of war and colonialism in French crime fiction. Right. And so I didn't have a background in history as such, but a lot of my PhD was taken up with history, and I was really interested in that. So there's a whole spectrum of things you get to look at when you study languages. And so I got to teach one or two classes with Dervla, and we were looking at Amélie and real contemporary things, and you know, students really like that. And who doesn't like going to the cinema? And if you can do that in college, why not?
Yeah, if your homework is to watch a Netflix film in French or Spanish, I don't think you'd complain too much. Sounds lovely. No. And did you ever think, Jack, say if you throw, you know, all the way back to maybe when you were in secondary school, did you think you'd ever go down the research route, or did you have a different kind of career in mind? Did you think that was even possible by doing languages?
So the reason I decided to study languages, I think, was because I wanted to travel. And after I did my BA, during my BA, I did a year's Erasmus, and I'm pretty sure you can do that in DCU as well. And that was just a fantastic opportunity. And I wouldn't have gotten a H1 in French for my Leaving Cert, and I would have been an average student. But then when I got to throughout first and second year, but then when I got to do Erasmus, I just exponentially increased my fluency in French. And it's a fantastic opportunity, So the international business students, they'll have that choice as well. And my French improved miles, but I also got to like learn loads about French culture. It's fantastic opportunity. And then after my BA, I did that again. I went back to France and I taught in a university as an English tutor for a year. Again, great opportunity, different part of France, another different experience. And so it was travel, it was what I was interested in, and French and Irish. But and in coincidence, it's important to mention that those two experiences were key to me pursuing the PhD as well, because I was lucky enough to be awarded a scholarship from DCU to do my PhD, and part of that included having to teach in the School of Applied Language and Intercultural Studies. So having that experience on my profile really added, and it's going to add to anyone. If you don't want to pursue research, it really adds to your profile anyway, having worked abroad for a year. So
absolutely no downside to that, I'd imagine. So we might go over to Connor now, who isn't long gone from secondary school, so could maybe cast his mind back to when he was considering, am I going to do a language in university? Connor, how did you decide on DCU for international business with Spanish?
Yeah, I think it was, so I had sort of a broad net cast just in terms of the courses that I was looking for. So I think I had a look at, I don't know, UCD, DCU, but DCU was my first choice because it really stood out to me just in terms of just the past pupils that had gone there, just everything they were telling me about it, just sort of the whole culture about it, the quality of languages. I knew someone who had done the course before. And I think that was something that really stuck out to me, was just hearing how well it was operated, how their languages improved to heights that they never thought were possible before. And that has been the same for me in my experience.
That's great. And often DCU does chat about the reputation, not only globally in terms of the connections that we have with partner universities, but the reputation in that the lecturers are super approachable. It's often a first name basis. And if you do need that support, it's readily available for you there. And I'd imagine some students are apprehensive about taking on either a new language or continuing on a language from secondary school and wondering, will they struggle? How will I be prepared for my Erasmus? How do you expect me to go abroad in third year? I don't think I'll be able to do it, but DCU will get you there. You have all the tools there and a lot of support. So Connor, have you been on your Erasmus with DCU your final year? So you would have gone abroad to Spain already?
Yeah, I went to Barcelona, so unfortunately I only got 6 months out of it, but It was still probably the best experience of my life, just heading to Barcelona, but also just in terms of the support that DCU give you. So although maybe other universities back in terms of maybe administrative responsibilities, you have DCU to remind you that, look, everything's okay, everything's being processed, we're in touch with them, if you need our help, we're there, we can chat to them. So they really made the transition to living abroad just seamless.
Yeah, fantastic. And for someone who might be listening, Connor, who is interested in your course, what's the balance like between business and languages? And how do they ever cross over? Do they mix together in certain modules?
Yeah, so it's obviously international business studies. And with international business study, you study your general business modules, but then you also have an option for languages. So in my case, it's Spanish. I have German, French, Japanese, Chinese. So there's a wide array of languages to choose from. But just in terms of the balance, I'd probably put it maybe 60-40, 70-30 business, just in terms of the amount of modules that you have. But Spanish, just the Spanish modules that you have when you move in towards sort of maybe the end of your second year, or I think predominantly second year, you're moving into that sort of technical language, that business language. And then in third year, obviously you have to deal with a lot of projects in Spanish while you're on your Erasmus. So business sees a lot of, we'll say, focus in terms of your language. Then your fourth year is just completely, you're really focused on business, real technical aspects of the grammar and applying it to sort of real world scenarios. So in the first year, it's more of, we'll say, a general sort of test of your knowledge, just how are you doing with your language. But then as you have you grasp it, then you move on to more complex, maybe specific scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Derb, I might ask you kind of on a similar strand about the structure of, say, the applied language and translation studies degree. In first year, what's the difference between year 1, 2, and 3, and even possibly 4 in terms of what the students are learning and how there's those building blocks towards the end?
Right, okay. Well, that's a difficult question. I teach most on the joint honours, to be honest, Sinead. I do teach on the ALTS as well, and I've taught on second year for that, so I don't have a great overview of what's done in fourth year, but I have a feeling that their literature comes in second year and a little bit in first year, as in their culture and literature, and then they would either choose, okay, so this is the point with ALTS now, it's changed recently. You can choose to go on to a fourth year after a third year. So everybody does 3 years in DCU. This is only recently changed. Now everybody does 3 years in DCU, and then you can either choose to do your year abroad, which is your fourth year, and that gives you ALS International after your name, and then or you can choose to finish up after 3 years. So the third years actually do literature. Of course they do. Yes, I've had them, and they were doing that Quebec and a contemporary French course with me today, and they do. I did film with them in the first. In second year. Yeah, now I don't know what they do in first year, to be honest, for ALS, but for BA Joint Honours there's more focus on literature and culture, and obviously they do a little bit of translation actually, but not a whole lot. And Connor, I don't know whether you do much literature or film, or did you do any at all?
So I think maybe first year there was a heavy focus on literature and film, so it was to really give you sort of insight into what sort of shaped the Spanish culture and a bit into its history. And it's maintained sort of a constant part of the course as we progress throughout the years. So for example, in this year, we did focus a lot on Spanish films, which I thought was really, really interesting. So it's as if you're viewing it as if you're just a nerd and going to the movies. That's something that's really interesting. It's not your typical maybe review of maybe old-timey films with specific structured questions. This is actual, have a look at this movie and see what you think. Give me a review. What do you like? What is your opinion of this? So that's something that really stood out to me just in the past year. But yeah, that's sort of the same. It's a constant sort of part of it.
Okay. Exactly. Would you be doing novels as well, Connor? Because this is something I don't know, because I don't teach on the international business. But so I'm pretty sure you're involved in a kind of a general first year literature and society course, isn't that correct? Yeah, which is poetry and maybe short story and that, but perhaps not a novel or a play, and just maybe small bits of films, or what is it?
We have, so it's sort of sure. When I was in first year, we looked at 1 or 2 movies, and we also had this. It was like a book where you had the Spanish on one side and the English on the other side. I think it was a short story, sort of a penguin book. Yeah. And I think we took maybe 1 or 2 of those stories and sort of did a review of that and studied sort of the techniques and the language skills. But that's sort of, we moved away from that as we progressed throughout. So in second year, it was more sort of, we'll say, real life scenarios. And then in fourth year, we stuck with the films, but we didn't really integrate sort of literature in terms of like physical books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a bit of back and forth in your case then. Yeah.
And that's great advice for a student who is listening today, who maybe does want to go on to study languages, but isn't sure if they would prefer to do something like applied language and translation studies, whether they'd like to do joint honours or whether they'd like to take the business element. So those modules are quite important then in terms of making a decision, and they're all available online on the DCU course pages. So if someone is interested, the course structure is available in the about this course section of the webpage. So you can even compare and contrast if that is something that you have an interest in. And anyone free to hop in here for the next question. A lot of students are concerned about, say, employment. What jobs can I get from this course is a very frequent question that comes up. Jack, maybe for example, some of your peers who have graduated, what sort of areas have they gone into after graduating from even a master's in languages?
Yeah, so the Masters in Translation Studies, some of my classes would have been shared with the final year students of the ALTS program. So a lot of my peers from that have gone on to great opportunities. I have friends working in Facebook and Airbnb as project managers in the translation department. but as well as that, I have other peers who've gone on to work in the European institutions as translators and proofreaders. So I think the thing to take away from the job hunting aspect is that languages really add to your profile. So if you do the BA, we'll say, and you have 2 languages, or and you decide afterwards you want to go into media, well, if you're fluent in French and Spanish or whatever the case, you're going to have a fantastic profile. And it's the same if you want to go into if you want to do a qualification in computer science afterwards, because there's so many jobs advertised. It's, we'll say, programmer with Spanish needed, or project manager with French. So you're really making yourself stand out as a candidate by having fluency in languages to your profile.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's such a good point as well. It's probably a degree with a language is a plane ticket almost in terms of traveling and being able to work across the world and combine your own interests. So if there is a student listening today who maybe isn't sure exactly what they want to do, that's very normal. And a lot of us aren't sure exactly what we want to do. If you're interested in languages, we would say absolutely go for it, because as you said, Jack, you can enter different industries as well. You're not limited to just speaking that language forever. You know, you can combine other interests. And Derv, I see you've raised your hand. You know, I don't know if you did that.
I lower it now.
Feel free to speak if you'd like, just hop in. But I might ask you a similar question in terms of your experience lecturing in the joint honours, Dervla, and potential careers that students go on to. Will they often pair their language with the other subject that they're studying and pursue that kind of career?
Well, could I just, on a point of clarification, just in DCU we don't do 2 languages together, so as joint honours. So you would be doing French and media, French and law. Now for French, now this is the same for German and Spanish. So you do French and media, French and law, French and politics, or French and Gaeilge. Actually, you can at the moment still do French and Gaeilge, I'm pretty sure. So that's that. So it would be 1 language plus what you say then another, you know, distinct program, which would be then media, politics, or law, or Gaeilge at the moment. And I just wanted to say, pick up on a few things that both Connor and Jack have said about going abroad. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience for me too. And I think for the 2 of you sounds like absolutely the same. But in terms of employment, if you're going abroad, it actually adds massively to the employer's willingness to consider your application if you have managed abroad, because you've shown the maturity to do so. You've coped in another language. You've come to terms with a lot of different things that you've had to face, and so that really bumps you up if you've done that. So that's something to bear in mind. And the other thing to bear in mind is that languages are not just languages. I was trying to find online this really wonderful document that I was given 10 years ago when I was in Oxford Brookes. I think it was either 1,000 or 100 reasons to study languages. So you can have a look for it with a big yellow poster. I think it must have been 100 because you couldn't fit 1,000 on a poster. But it was okay. So, but the interesting things was it improves your command of English. So that helps you report right. It improves the higher order thinking, the organization of thought, the clarity of thought, the presentation, your writing skills in general. It improves your understanding of English. So you may end up working in English as a foreign language. You may end up working in media. You may end up working as a journalist. You may end up working in a museum, writing or looking at, you know, whatever. Or you may be actually using language or you may be doing this with law or with politics. You might become a broadcaster or whatever. But it hones all those things, plus your critical thinking, particularly if you're doing literature, because you have to think about a lot of you know, why is this character doing this? Why is this author doing this? How is this being subtly brought across? And you have to have this constant sort of critical thinking going on. So it's a lot of higher order skills. People might dismiss it as just fit for teaching. Oh, God forbid. But actually, no. Okay, you can be a wonderful teacher, but you can also be a teacher and other things, or you could use it as a stepping stone to something completely different.
Exactly. Something that DCU is really passionate about, especially in recent years, is what you mentioned earlier, transversal skills, and the fact that you graduate with a skill set that will allow you to work across various different careers and industries. So it isn't just that you will graduate fluent with the language. As you said, there's critical thinking involved, higher order thinking, and just making sure that you're clear in everything that you're saying and you're writing, and analytical. And that's really important in terms of your career to navigate around. And they predict that people graduating over the next couple of years will have 10 plus jobs in their lifetime. You're never really in a job for life anymore in terms of just being stationary. There's lots of room to travel, whether that's physically or just through different career paths. So a degree in languages can really help that. We just have a question come into the Q&A there, and someone said, can you choose which partner university you go to? I don't know, Connor, or maybe Derval has had experience with that. I mean, you would probably be going to one in the country of the language you've chosen to study, or a country that speaks that language also. But how does that application process work? Connor, you might talk about your one in particular.
Yeah, I think so what happens is, and actually it's probably good that you asked that question, is a lot of us actually came into the course, and what some people were unclear of, I think we had a talk sort of explaining how the process would work. So it was based on your language grades, and you went in order of how you got to pick. So if you do really well in your Spanish modules, you get first pick. So obviously you would want to do well in your first year, but a lot of people didn't attend that talk. So that was something that they sort of missed out on. But so there is a kind of, with some courses, they sort of say that first year isn't graded. But in this case, your language modules are taken into account, sort of just what is your capability. So based on your sort of performance in languages, you get first pick or first crack or whatever. So in my case, luckily I tried to consistently perform as best as I can, but I got first pick. And yeah, so that's essentially what it is. You get to pick from a list of language partners that DCU have. So I went to the University of Barcelona, but there was also a university in Valencia, Bilbao, Andalusia. There's tons of them, and they're really top quality. They're really world-renowned universities, and that's something that I really want to highlight, is sort of the connections that DCU have in terms of languages and partner universities is just, you can't put a price on it. It's really invaluable.
Exactly. I'm just going to put into the chat there, Connor, as you finished up speaking, a link to our webpage that has a list of our partner universities there. If someone would like to have a browse around the different options that are available to you. So just as we come into the last couple of minutes, please do send in any last questions and answers, and we'll answer them. We'd be more than happy to get back to you before the end of the session. One thing I like to ask towards the end is for people to give their top tips for studying languages, whether that's from, an undergrad perspective, an academic perspective, what you've seen throughout the years, and what you think could really help someone coming into the university. So feel free, anyone, to hop in if anything comes to mind in terms of a tip for our listeners today.
Well, okay, I will hop in just to start. I mean, this is off the top of my head, but certainly something that's really important is to have some sort of connection with speaking French, because you do a lot of reading and writing, but if you don't go abroad, you don't get the actual native experience. So if you can at all, buddy up with an Erasmus student that's over, or there's the wonderful Lingua Culture space, which we haven't mentioned, which is really unique to DCU, where they have this room where you can go, and there's events, international events. Sometimes they're mixed, sometimes they're per discipline as in per subject, and you have Erasmus students coming along. Just make friends with them, and that will be absolutely invaluable. And if you can't do that, there's pen pals, there's now virtual things that you can do online, there's virtual exchanges. So the speaking of it is very important, especially if you're not going to go away, if you're not going to be able to go away. And also just be organized in your notes and keeping track of how you're progressing. And don't forget the grammar. Grammar is important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great tip. Again, something that someone might not know before they enter DCU. So that's really great advice. Jack or Connor, any words of wisdom?
Look at your test results and see where you went wrong. I think a lot of students, they'll shy away from that aspect, but that's where you really learn, is to see where you went wrong in your grades, how you can improve. And
that's a great point, Jack. That's a really good point. Yeah.
And a lot, like most lecturers would be more than happy to talk through it with a student through a test or an essay, or and tell them how they can improve. And I think that's key to learning in no matter what you want to pursue at university. And as Dervla said, you need to find a way to speak whatever language you're learning outside of the classroom. So you have the language culture space, and there's also the French SOC. When you go to university, you'll join clubs and societies, and make sure that you're active in French SOC, or when I was in an undergrad, there was a French society, and we did a play in French, and that was like so helpful for learning, because you really have to know what you're saying in the play. You can't pretend to understand whatever line you're delivering. So it's learning outside the classroom is really important, and you get through that on campus in DCU and in the bar and everywhere else in the library. So
and what about French song, Jack? Did you listen to French songs at all?
I suppose that when I was living in France, that was a bit more easier to come across, I think, because it's on the radio, or but there was a few classes with cultural classes that we picked apart songs and stuff. So
you listen to them again and again, because my excellent teacher Brigitte Lejoise, who was from DCU but she was in UCD when I went to college, that's where I went to college, she gave me a tape of kind of a compilation of French songs, and I just listened to it on a loop, and it just went into my brain, because the syntax, is brilliant to learn, do you know what I mean, and the pronunciation. So I would do that, and that's easy, you can get them online.
Spotify.
It's so accessible now, and it's all about that.
I envy people.
Exactly. Social learning, where you're actually learning and practicing and you don't even feel like it. It's more difficult to sit down and think, I have to write this assignment or do something for the sake of it. Whereas if you're watching your TV through that language, or as you said, Dervla, listening to a song or doing a play or a musical, Jack, all really great ways to just keep it, at the front of your mind, and you don't.
I just plug one thing there, Sinead, for anyone there who wants to know what job they can do, and they have Irish and they want to do another language, the EU is crying out for Irish translators, and they're super well paid jobs. All you have to do is an incredible level of Irish and a good knowledge of another European language. And you walk into a job with an amazing salary and amazing benefits. So any Gael Skull, Winter Gael Skull out there, go for it. That is the job. If you just want to do college for 3-4 years and then walk into a good paying job, this is what you need to do.
I think that is the top tip of the day. That is very clever. That's really great to know. Conor, just before I ask you, maybe if you've any tips that haven't been mentioned, there's a question in here about a mature student non-native speaker. So I'm just going to send you a link in the chat here to our international office, which have lists of the English entry requirements and the different tests that you can do to gain entry into DCU. So hopefully that link will help. And if you've any further questions, you can follow up via our email address. So hopefully that helps there. Conor, just to come to you then before we finish up, we're almost out of time. Any tips that haven't been covered that you think you'd like to mention to our prospective students on the call?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with the two previous tips, just in terms of really put the effort in, try find different exchange partners or different people to learn languages, because the thing is with DCU, they obviously like the language cultural space. They have outstanding facilities, outstanding support, professors, teachers, materials to help you. But at the end of the day, it is up to you to pick it up and sort of go that bit further. So when I went to Barcelona, I sort of sought out these, you can just meet up with people and have language exchanges. So I spoke English for 30 minutes and then they spoke Spanish for 30 minutes. And it's something that really stands to you in terms of when you come back and you're doing all these exams, it's a lot easier to you because you've covered some of this stuff just by chatting to people. And then if you're doing interviews or whatever and they want to test your language abilities, you've already had that training, you've already had that experience. So I really would just push anybody who's listening or interested in languages to go and seek out those additional resources, or really push yourself to try new things. So join the societies, reach out, learn different songs, listen to the podcast, because it is crucial and it is what will separate you from the rest at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'd say it really helps build your confidence, Connor, as you mentioned, for interviews or to chat with locals. You know, it's really great to get that experience. Just before we finish up, I will mention that the School of Applied Languages and Intercultural Studies are running a competition for TY students. So I'm not sure if there are any TY students on the call today, but I'm sure someone knows someone who's a TY student who may be interested. So they have a fantastic video kind of graphic competition where if you would like to record a video about your experience with languages during the pandemic. So whether you learned a recipe from a cook who speaks a different language to you, or whether you discovered a new podcast or a new film in another language, if you can put that into video form in 60 seconds, you can be in with a chance. First prize is actually an iPad, which is an exceptional prize. So definitely send on that link if you do know anyone. If you're in TY yourself, if you know anyone who will be interested, we would love to hear about your time. So just before we finish up, any final words from our panelists? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to speak with us. Would you like to leave with any particular words for our attendees, or just best of luck with everything?
Well, did you say, Sinead, that that's actually in the chat, that link there with the
yes.
TY?
Yeah, I've just sent it in. Yeah, so all the attendees should see that there.
Yeah, okay. So if you click on it now, the tab will be up when you close out of this, just for people who aren't aware of that, because I wasn't until a few months ago. So you should click on the link now.
Yeah.
No, what Connor said about the exchanges, that's a brilliant idea, and it's free. Do you know what I mean? And if you don't get on with the person, you just move it, you just say, oh, I'm busy, next time or whatever.
Absolutely.
Not tied into anything, and meet in a safe space, obviously, if you're doing this. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and you can do it virtually now, so if you're not able to do it abroad, you can do lots of people are wanting to learn English. So, you get your pick of people willing to do conversation exchange with you virtually. I don't know the specific platforms, but I do know they exist.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as much as we all want to go back to, physical contact and lectures and that such, a lot of it will continue online, which is a great point to make, is that if you do want to meet someone from the comfort of your sit room on a Zoom call to practice your language, I'm sure there'll be plenty of resources to do that going forward. So we're just out of time today. There's no more questions coming into the chat. So I think our panelists have done a fantastic job in covering all the questions before they were even asked, which is always a great sign. But you can keep in contact with us. The email that you would have received this link from today, studenthelp@dcu.ie, is the general inbox for any incoming prospective student query. So if you do have a question, in hindsight, if you go and cook your dinner and you think of something and you want to ask us a question, do send us an email to that address and we can forward it on to any of our panelists if they do have a particular question for one of you. But thank you so much to not only our attendees who tuned in today, and hopefully it was informative for you, but also our panelists who, as I said, took the time out of their evening to speak with us. A really, really useful session. We will have it recorded and we might put it up on YouTube, and you can ask for a link for it if you would like to watch it again. But thank you very much to everyone. Do send on any further questions that we have, and we really hope to see you in DCU at the future. So thank you very much, and thanks again to our panelists.
Thanks very much, guys.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.